Close your eyes and imagine the smell of rain on morning earth, fresh brewed chai, blooming peonies in a well-tended garden. Can you see it? Almost taste it? We use our senses to create home, the place where we feel joy and belonging. In life's journey, what we think of as our home evolves. We build new homes from our dreams, sacrifices, and journeys of miles and years. And for Indianapolis immigrants, home goes by many names. I'm Erica Irish, and in this podcast by the Indianapolis Public Library, we're learning what home means to Indy's immigrant community. Through their diverse lived experiences, we'll see how, rather than exchanging an old home for a new one, immigrants create a powerful new idea, that home is so much more than a place. Well, hello, dear listeners. You're here for our very first episode of More Than a Place, and it is our pleasure to welcome Vanessa Monfreda to the show. She's going to share with us a really exciting story that spans multiple countries, many experiences. And Vanessa, we're just so glad to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm very excited to have this interview with you.
Yeah, thank you. Would you like to tell the audience just a little bit about yourself, what you do? What kind of is the summary of who you are today?
Well, I'm a collage artist and a paper mache artist. I'm also a mother of four. Currently still raising a teenager. And that takes most of my time, and sometimes that interferes with making artwork, but I try to put all my time in doing collage work. And I was born in Chile, and when I was a year old, we moved to Germany. And then in Germany, I lived there for 16 years. And then in 1986, we moved to Ecuador, Quito, where I finished high school. And then I did some soul searching, and I went to Germany for a year, and then I went back to Ecuador, and then I went to Chile, kind of continent hopping. And somehow I ended up here in Indianapolis, and Indianapolis is my home now.
Yeah. How long have you been here in Indianapolis?
Since 97.
97. That's quite a few years, decades now. What has it been like to see the city evolve and be here in that time?
Yeah, I would say that Indianapolis is definitely my home now. It took me a bit to get used to it, though. But I guess it helps that my husband is from Indianapolis and that I had two children here in Indianapolis. So I'm definitely setting roots in Indianapolis.
Absolutely. Well, and you mentioned, core to your identity is that you're an artist. You specialize in, as you said, paper mache, collage art. Where in your journey did you first consider yourself an artist or find that as a path that you wanted to travel?
I think I always wanted to be an artist from I think it started like in middle school, and the art teacher introduced us to collage art, and I was so fascinated with that medium that I just started doing it at home on my desk in my room. And obviously I would fantasize about being an artist, but I had no idea what that really means. And my parents would always discourage me to be an artist. They would tell me not to be an artist because then you're not going to have any money. So just do something that brings money and you can survive, But yeah.
Yeah. With that first encounter in middle school, what do you remember about it? What about the medium interested you? Was it a specific artwork that was shown to you or the process itself? What stood out to you?
Yeah, we had to go through discarded magazines and just do a collage with all those images. So I think what I was really attracted to, that there were discarded materials, and I didn't feel that pressure of when you buy new materials and you like they're expensive and everything, and there is so much pressure of that the artwork has to be nice. But with collage, it's somehow different. You can make your own destiny and journey, and you really don't know what is going to happen.
Mhm. I love it. I definitely resonate with that. I'm a person who, picks up hobbies every month, it feels like, and then I buy things and I feel such guilt and pressure when I don't follow through. So, yeah, I love this idea of creating something new from discarded materials. Um, Going back a little bit, you mentioned when you were very young, that was when your family moved to Germany. What prompted the move? And those are really, your childhood years, your formative years. What do you remember about that time?
It was hard. I remember that I had just started to talk Spanish. I was a year and a half old, and then we moved to Germany, and my mom said I got upset and I didn't really speak until I was like 3 years old, because I was a little confused. Why were we suddenly in Germany? And I had no clue why we were there. Um, I remember my mother being depressed about that we suddenly were in Germany, and that kind of had an impact on me. Um, yeah, that's all I can really think of right now.
Yeah. Did you move there to be with family or for work?
No, we moved because the situation in Chile wasn't good, and my dad just wanted to get out. And these were the 70s, and everything was just a mess. And my dad just said, "Okay, let's go to Germany." And we ended up in Germany, not really knowing anybody, and that's why it was a difficult time.
Hmm. Did you find that you met more people over time, or was because I mean you were there 16 years, I believe you said.
Hmm.
Um, what kind of was the progression of your time there? Did it always feel like you were isolated, or did you meet more people?
Oh
And
no, over time,
yeah.
I definitely like Germany was my home, and I did my elementary years there and middle school. And I mean, I lived in this little cute town called Bergisch Gladbach. I would ride my bicycle everywhere, and there was a bakery, and there was a little tiny post office, just this little tiny town with little tiny streets. That's kind of how I grew up in Germany, and it was nice.
How did art emerge for you in Germany? Obviously, it's a city that's renowned for great architecture, thinkers, artists. Um, did you encounter art in your surroundings at all? And did that influence you on your
Art
path?
Art was everywhere. I mean, in everyday life. There's so much emphasis on art in Germany, I think. Um, like art class was serious. I mean, art class was just as serious as like English or German. And they would put a lot of emphasis on that. And then my parents put a lot of emphasis on us having classes. Like I would have flute lessons, and then my brother would have violin lessons, and then we took ballet classes. And yeah, it was very rich in culture and arts.
Very full, inspiring schedule, it sounds like. And so after Germany, you moved to Ecuador for a small period. What was that transition like for you?
Oh, I was furious that we moved. I didn't want to move. I was 16 years old, and I was getting into the whole punk rock new wave thing,
Mm.
rebelling against my parents. And suddenly they told me, "Okay, we're moving." And I was like, "What do you mean we're moving?" I was like, "Yeah, we're moving to Ecuador." I'm like, "Ecuador? Where is that?" I didn't even know where Ecuador was. So looked it up and all that, and I was like in total protest mode, and I didn't want to move. Rebelled, but at the end, I ended up in Quito, Ecuador, and it was the same thing happened to me than when I was a little kid. I think I got a culture shock, and it took me a while to really embrace all the beauty in Ecuador. But Ecuador is a beautiful country.
Mm.
It's beautiful.
What aspects of it do you remember the most? Like
Oh, the
what
food.
struck you as, oh, the food?
Yeah, the food. The food is just wonderful. And Quito, where I lived, is um, there's all these tiny little restaurants, and you go in a little tiny restaurant, so there are maybe like 2 or 3 little tables, and you have really good Ecuadorian food. It usually always starts with a soup.
Mm. What are the soups, hot or cold, or
Oh,
what
they're
were the
hot. It's like
they're
a
hot.
chicken soup or potato soup. And
Mm.
then there's the main dish, which is with rice and maybe some beans, and then there's dessert, which is like a fruit juice.
Mm. Yeah, I can't go wrong with fresh fruit. That sounds so good. Going back, you mentioned you were entering a punk rock new wave kind of scene.
Yeah.
Were you saying that just like to describe your attitude, or were you actually like wearing the fashion and following certain influences?
Oh
What do you
yeah,
mean by that?
I was wearing the fashion, and I was wearing only black clothes, and my my ears were all pierced up, and I came with that attitude to Ecuador, Quito, and people weren't really used to it. It's like, what is that? But later I found some people that were into that kind of scene, and I found my little niche.
Yeah. Was it more accepted in Germany?
Yeah, it was definitely more accepted in Germany, even though in Germany it was kind of frowned upon. But I think there were more venues where you could go and see the band that you listened to, and there was more opportunities for it.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, in Ecuador, uh, those bands that I listened to had never even been to Ecuador yet.
Right. How then did you, because you mentioned eventually even in Ecuador you found a community. How did you find your people?
There were artists, so there were artists, there were musicians or painters, and there was a very international group in Quito. I would meet people from all over the world. It's like in the middle of the world, Quito, and somehow you meet people from all over, and it's very interesting. So that was kind of my niche in Ecuador then.
Yeah.
And
Excellent.
that's when I knew definitely that I wanted to be an artist.
Mm. What finalized it for you? Like, do you remember the moment where you said to yourself, I am an artist. This is what I want to do with my life.
Um, I joined this art class in high school, and my art teacher, she saw that I was really passionate about it, and I entered like an IB art program.
Yeah.
So it was like more intense, and she kind of guided me to it, and she's kind of the one who mentored me and made me decide that I wanted to be an artist.
It's
So it was
amazing.
definitely my high school art teacher.
Yeah. Thank goodness for them.
I
I mean, high
know.
school teachers have done so much to mentor people, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was really hard to be in a high school, and everybody there were the athletes, and then there were the really popular people, and I was kind of more like the one always dressed in black and in the art club. But that is what saved me, was art class.
Hmm.
it definitely saved me.
Mm. What did it save you from?
Um, I think from depression, maybe, because I got really depressed when we moved to Ecuador. I just really did not want to live there.
That's
I
fair.
really wanted to live in Germany.
Yeah. Well, and after Ecuador, you mentioned that you used a specific phrase, soul searching was what happened for you after Ecuador. Um, so you were a young adult, it seems, and you moved to Chile. What what started that soul searching process for you? What were you looking for?
I was looking for a home when I was in Germany in 1989. Um, I was looking for a home there, but I couldn't really find it. And my family was in Ecuador, but um, they were fantasizing about moving back to Chile. So we were all talking about, okay, let's all move back to Chile. But somehow nobody of us really got used to it. Like we went to Chile and we couldn't adapt.
But you mentioned, you struggled to adapt and what areas. You mentioned the social aspect before. What made it hard to adapt?
Maybe because I always had an accent and people would immediately see me that I'm not from there. So when I moved to Chile back when I was 20 years old, um, there was that aspect, I think, and that made me different, I guess.
Mm.
Uh, so I did a lot of soul searching up. I didn't know if I wanted to live in Chile or not, and at the end, I quit art school. I I had a terrible time in art school. I somehow yeah, I dropped out of art school, and that was a huge blow to me. Definitely.
Mm.
I think that's what I mean by soul searching.
So it was more at the end of your time in Chile. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. I
And I
see.
moved back to Ecuador, and then there I was living in Ecuador, and I met my ex-husband there, and I got married and I had two kids with him. And then we decided to move to Indianapolis, Indiana, because we had that opportunity to move there. So it was either Miami or Indianapolis, and we chose
Oh,
Indianapolis
interesting.
over
What
Miami.
what stood out to you about Indianapolis
I
when
just
making that
really
decision?
wanted to be where the Four Seasons were again, and which is I love about Indiana. I love the Four Seasons. In Ecuador, there weren't really four seasons. It was just every day. Well, it was the rain season, and that's it. But there wasn't like strong seasons like the winter and the fall and spring and summer. It's just very fascinating to me, the four seasons.
Yeah. Do the seasons do they influence your art? This idea of nature and seasons?
um, not really. It influences me maybe in how much artwork I make. Usually in the winter seasons, I'm more sleepy,
Yes. I
so
relate.
I'm less awake, and so I do less artwork. I sleep more. And in summer, it feels like I have way more energy in the evening to do more stuff than in the winter time.
Absolutely. So it changes our moods more than
Oh,
anything.
definitely.
Yeah,
It definitely has a huge impact on me, other seasons.
absolutely.
So sometimes I'm like, why didn't we just move to Miami? But then I think I'm glad we moved here to Indiana.
Good. Well, so you moved to Indianapolis, it was the late 90s.
Yeah.
What was your impression of the city when you first moved here?
Um, I just remember it being so clean. everything was so clean and organized. And I remember that people were really nice. I think people here are really nice and very welcoming.
Mm. How do
So
they,
that's the first thing that I would notice. Yeah.
yeah. How do they demonstrate being nice?
Well, they would. Well, that was my fault. They would invite me to go and join their church, but I don't really go to church.
Yeah,
So maybe I never really knew what to say. It would be like, oh, well, welcome to the States. And then they would give me a little pamphlet of the church that they were part of, you know. And I'd be like, oh, no, thank you. And
yeah. That's so. It's more like people are reaching out, like bringing you into their
I think people
circles.
are very helpful.
How so?
I didn't feel that when I went to Chile. I didn't feel that people were very helpful. People were still very upset about the dictatorship, I think. And especially in Santiago. Santiago is a big city, and people will tell you, don't trust anybody, just lock the door tight. It's a big city, so it's a different mentality. Whereas here in Indianapolis, it's a little city, so people are more friendly, I think.
For sure. And I'm sure not experiencing, societal turmoil might affect people too. Like in, I don't know if it's different. Like if people haven't gone through a circumstance like you mentioned, the dictatorship, they might see things differently. Do you think that's part
Mm,
of it?
yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
More Than a Place is made possible by the Indianapolis Foundation Library Fund through a grant to the Indianapolis Public Library Foundation. Well, and one thing we haven't talked about, it's come up a little bit, but in our preparation for this, I learned that you speak 3 languages.
yeah, I
Is that
speak
correct?
three, actually a little bit of
Yeah.
French, but not enough French to um, be alone in France and get around. I guess
Yeah.
it wouldn't be enough French.
So which languages do you speak?
I speak Spanish, German, and English, and I
What's
constantly think in them every day.
Yeah. Can you describe what that's like? Do you cycle through like one sentence as a language, or is it more distorted than that? What's kind of your day-to-day experience having that vast knowledge?
Well, when I wake up in the morning, I try to think about my dreams, and I'm never really sure in what language I dreamt. And I'm like, I usually speak in my sleep, and my daughter will sometimes hear me, and he's like, I think you had quite you were quite upset to speaking in German, you know, and you were saying Johann, which is my brother's name, so so I guess it depends on what. I don't know. Dreams are just really weird because you never know what time it is in dreams because they're all memories.
Mm, that's true. Um, thank you for describing that. I just have to say it's amazing. I speak one language, sub Spanish, so it's it's really amazing to hear that thought process and how it impacts you. Um, I want to take us to maybe a higher level. We sent you some questions before the interview that talk more about what home means. So
Mm-hmm.
you've described your journey to the listeners, and now I want us to unpack like from where you are today, how have all these experiences impacted you? Um, so I guess I'll start by asking, what do you consider your home? What does home feel like to you?
Home is definitely means to me where family is, food. Food is a big factor, and art. That's home to me. Those are essential, those factors. But definitely my family, and that's what comes in mind.
Yeah. Well, your core family, like you said earlier, is here in Indianapolis. Do you have family all over the world?
Yeah, my sister lives in Vienna, Austria, and my younger brother lives in Berlin, and then he commutes to Vienna. It's between Berlin and Vienna. But I haven't seen them in a while.
You mentioned the importance of food to home. We had a little conversation about Ecuadorian soup and dishes. What foods, whenever you encounter them, maybe even just smell them walking by, uh, make you feel like you're home?
Um, well, definitely Chilean empanadas. My mom would make those when we lived in Germany. Every time we had something festive going on, she would make Chilean empanadas.
Mm.
And that reminds me of home. And um, German potato salad
Mm.
kind of reminds me of home. And then just dishes from all the countries that I lived kind of remind me of home. Now, there are certain dishes that I love here in Indiana too, like chili.
Yeah. With noodles?
Actually, I know they make
No.
it in Indiana with noodles, but I like it more without. But it definitely is one of my favorite dishes, especially in the fall when it gets colder.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned the Chilean empanadas and the German potato salad. What flavors or techniques make them like? Are they? Because I know there are empanadas and other interpretations of that dish. Does the Chilean empanada taste different or have a
Well,
different focus?
there's different types of empanadas. The empanadas that you can bake in the oven, or you can just fry them. So I know in Ecuador there are empanadas. You have empanadas. There are two cheese empanadas, but they're like fried. And the Chilean empanadas, you put them in the oven. And I just remember it always had a lot of olives.
Hmm.
Those were Chilean empanadas, and it had hard-boiled eggs and some chicken and uh, ground beef.
Sounds
It just
hearty.
yes,
Sounds
and you
good.
can't really eat two in a row because if it's so much. It's yeah.
Yes. Um, I know Indy, I'm sure you've seen our food scene evolve in your time living here. I feel like there's so many restaurants in our area now, all kinds of flavors. Are there any restaurants here in Indianapolis that you'd recommend if somebody wanted to try some of the food you described?
Well, I just know where I really want to go is to the Argentine restaurant on the west side. My friend Sakura told me about it. It's called Che Chori. And now
Mm.
that we were talking about empanadas, that's where I really want to go is Che Chori and try his empanadas.
Mm.
Um, favorite restaurant, I really like a Thai restaurant that's on the northwest side. I think it's called Thai Taste
Mm.
in Castleton. But also on the west side of Indianapolis, there are all these international restaurants, and they're all
Right.
wonderful too.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And
I'm gonna
then my husband is the best cook, so
is
I
he?
love his food the most.
What's his specialty?
He doesn't really have a specialty. It's just to me, there is nothing better than a home cooked meal. And I don't really like cooking anymore. So he will cook, and I'm always very thankful when he cooks. So I'll do
Yeah.
the dishes.
There. Yes, divide the labor, but definitely it's cooking is some people's acts of service or your love language. Yeah, I really relate to that. Um, so we got through a few sensations that remind you of home, specifically taste and food, what smells remind you of home? So,
Coffee.
coffee?
Coffee. Just
Yeah.
I love the smell of coffee, and it's so universal. A coffee shop in any country, it's always so exquisite. You never know how a coffee shop is.
Mhm.
Like right now, my favorite coffee shop is Gold Leaf that's here in my neighborhood.
Yes.
Have you been there?
I have. I used to be in that area as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually my
Gold leaf is good.
neighborhood right there.
Yeah.
And I can just walk 2 streets and I'm at Gold Leaf, but I had to stop going because I was buying too many croissants every day.
It's the best problem to have.
Yes, yeah, eventually it was like, oh my gosh, I spent all that money on a coffee shop. And, well, that's insane. So yeah,
It's
it's definitely the smell of coffee. I love the smell of coffee. It's just yeah, it
yeah.
gives me like this feeling of cozy and homey.
Yeah, absolutely. How did I don't know if this is going to make sense, but I'm going to ask it. I think of the idea of like cafe culture. So people today go to cafes maybe to work remotely on their laptops.
Uh-huh.
But I know in some cultures, like the cafe is a place to really talk and converse and meet people
Uh-huh.
or do your or practice art. Did you have any experiences with that? And I don't know if it looked different from Germany to Ecuador to Chile when you were a young adult in art school, but what kind of cafe experiences have you had, if any?
Well, when I lived in Germany and I was a teenager, there was this ice cafe, Venezia. It was an Italian ice coffee shop, and
Mm.
all the teenagers would go there and with their little scooters and bicycles, and it was everybody would walk by that coffee shop just so you could see other teenagers. And it was really exciting. Then there was this other coffee shop, and we would meet there after school and gather. So yeah, that definitely always had a huge impact on me. Our coffee shops, and in Ecuador there were coffee shops that were very bohemian, and I would meet with other artists or musicians,
Mm.
and that's yeah, that's really what I like about coffee shops.
Yeah.
I think Starbucks kind of changed that here in the States because when I moved here in the late 90s, I don't think there were that many coffee shops in Indy. What do you think?
I was not born until
Oh, yeah.
1999, so I I was barely a thought then. I unfortunately don't know.
Hmm.
But I mean, even in the last, 5 years of my young adulthood, I'm 23. It I feel like the coffee scene has exploded. We have so many cafes here now that we didn't have before.
Hmm.
Um, so if it's expanded that much in recent years, I can only imagine how it was even earlier.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's wonderful coffee shops here in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
Gold Leaf, and then the provider. Um, there was this other coffee shop which is really close to Starbucks because I try not to go to Starbucks and rather go to local coffee shops.
Yeah. Well, it's like places like Starbucks emphasize convenience, getting your stuff to go. It sounds like you prefer more of the places that invite you to stay a little bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I like to sit in the coffee shop and
Yeah.
people observe. I mean,
Yes.
that's definitely something we did in the 80s. We would just sit in a coffee shop and observe people walking by, and we didn't have the iPhones. We weren't really glued to the screen. So we would watch. That's
Right.
kind of how I feel it was in the 80s.
Love it. Um, moving forward a little bit, I've loved this discussion so far. I'd love to ask you, what is a song that reminds you of home? A song
There's
or a
several.
sound?
There's several songs that remind me of home. There's songs of that remind me of the when I grew up in the 70s in Germany. Um, I remember visiting my friends, and he had this little recorder, and it was huge in the 70s. He had his own recorder. So, and then he played this record by the band Kraftwerk, She Is a Model. So whenever I listen to that song, it reminds me of Germany. But when I think of cumbia, I have to think of Ecuador, and Ecuador is definitely the music there. Cumbia reminds me of home. So I love to listen to cumbia too.
Yeah. Part of the prep, you may have done this, you might not have. It's okay if you didn't. We asked our guests to find an item or a belonging of yours that reminds you of home or represents home to you. Did you pick something for today?
Yeah, I have this tablecloth, an Ecuadorian tablecloth. It's very bright and with lots of colors. And my mom will use it in Ecuador whenever there's a reunion going on. And she gave this cloth to me, and I will use that same tablecloth when my children come to visit me. So whenever there is like a reunion or a birthday or Christmas or Easter, or you name it, I use that tablecloth. But I also use that tablecloth for my pop-up events.
Oh, so it's part of your art too.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
What does it look like?
It's red with really bright colors. You might have seen it. There's tablecloths like that in Mexico too.
I think I see it.
It's like with stripes.
It's beautiful. Yeah, we can maybe look into getting a photo of that after this. Yeah, that's awesome. And I looked a little bit of your art on your website, which we'll be sure to link in the description of this episode. And I love, there's one that was really focused on, I believe it was called Form and Color. And it had these patterns and shapes. And this is just like, I hear you talk about this bright red, beautiful tablecloth. You have some bright colors in that artwork. Is that kind of the style that you follow? How would you describe your style?
I definitely use a lot of colors. Colors are very important to me, and I think I got influenced with colors by all the countries that I lived in. When you in Quito, Ecuador, you see bright colors everywhere. Like suddenly there's a house, it's in pink, and next to it it's in turquoise. So then you go inside a coffee shop and it's red, and then there's yellow, and it definitely has a huge impact on me.
Excellent.
So yeah.
And I don't know how you think about your art or your creative process. So I'd love to know if home has that ever been a theme you've explored in your pieces, or what kinds of themes do you tend to explore in your works? Do you go a certain direction? Are there certain ideas that you find you keep coming back to again and again?
I usually like to just go through old magazines and look at images, and then I will cut them out, then I will put them away. And then later we'll sit down and use all the images that I collected throughout weeks, and I will try to make a composition with it.
So it's not like you go into it with an idea, you let the idea kind of reveal itself to you?
Yeah, I like it to be like a coincidence, or not really knowing what is going to happen. But usually it starts with an image that kind of has an impact, and then I will add compositions and colors to it and try to unify it somehow. I struggle sometimes with that I use too much color, and people will tell me, you know what, you should use less color, but it's really hard for me not to use colors. I somehow always have to have red and yellow it's in most of my work, there's red and yellow, like really bright colors.
So if for here, many of the people listening to this podcast will likely be Indianapolis locals. What's an area of our city you like to visit that it really makes you feel like you're home? And it could
Well,
be
it's
anything.
definitely the public library.
Oh,
I think it's an awesome building. I love going through there. I love downtown Mass Ave. I love walking through there and going all these tiny little shops. And I like going to the parks. I love Eagle Creek Park. I love the Harrison Park. And that's definitely something I love about Indianapolis, the parks.
perfect. Do you do anything at the parks, or do you just like the surroundings and being in nature?
I like to hike. It makes me focus just to go in the park and just hike for a couple, what am I saying, hours, or maybe just an hour, and just walk. It reminds me of Germany, because we would walk a lot in Germany too and hike.
And what kind of areas would you hike? Like woods or mountains?
In Germany?
Yeah, in Germany.
Yeah, usually in the woods. And you walk a lot over there. When I was a kid, we used to walk a lot to places. I somehow don't really see that here in Indianapolis. People walk a lot. Like I will walk and people will stop and ask me if I need a ride.
Yeah, it's definitely a car first city.
Yes,
for
definitely.
better or for worse.
Which is terrible because I don't drive at all.
Oh.
And which makes it sometimes difficult to get around. But so I take the bus, or I ride my bicycle, or I take Lyft.
Yes, hey, and you're close to the red line then with where you live?
Yeah, I'm on 46th Street, and I'm very close to a bus line and very close to the red line.
Great. Well, we're so excited. I'm sure I could speak to for listeners here and say, we're really excited to see what you continue to do as an artist. And thank you again for joining the show, Vanessa. It was great to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure.
Hi, everyone. It's Erica, and you're listening to More Than a Place, a podcast by the Indianapolis Public Library, produced in partnership with Kendall Antron of the Made in Indy podcast. We couldn't tell the unforgettable stories of our community without your support. Thank you for spending your valuable time with us. To keep learning about Indy immigrant leaders like Vanessa, visit IndyPL.org/morethanAplace. Thanks for listening.